Welcome back to Market on Close. I'm Marley Caden. It's time to dive now into some of the mega cap tech earnings that we've gotten so far this week. Joining us to discuss them is Daniel Rubino, the editor-in-chief of Windows Central. Now, Daniel, thank you for being with us this afternoon. I'd love to start just with some key takeaways you had from the Mag 7 earnings that we've gotten so far.
Yeah, it's been a pretty big week, lots of ups and downs, but for the most part, AI is the big story, as you guys were just discussing, and it's driving some real positive growth and real momentum. Microsoft came out on top, in my opinion, crossing that 4 trillion metric, which was a pretty big deal. They're also, going to the consumer market, they have enterprise, and they're kind of really well positioned for where AI is headed. I will say Apple had a very interesting quarter. Their sales were much higher for iPhone, Mac, and services, and this is all great. However, I am a little concerned about those numbers because I'm wondering how much of it was driven by fears that the tariffs are going to drastically increase prices. We did hear a lot of stories of iPhones costing $2,000 and such. So, the price will go up on the new iPhones coming out. The rumors have it around $50, but we'll have to see how Apple can navigate that. I think the bigger story with Apple, though, is the fact that, when it comes to AI, they don't have much of a story right now. They're behind the scenes trying to catch up to everyone. And while it may not seem like a big deal, obviously the stock reacted to that in a negative way by kind of punishing them despite beating expectations in all the other areas. iPads and wearables also went down. That's been a trend for the last few years, and I expect that to continue. When it comes to Samsung, although they didn't report their earnings, they had a big week too because for the first time, their foldable phones seem to be catching on with consumers. This has been a struggle for them. They're literally on the 7th version, 6 years of making these devices, but their sales have been exceptional for them, up 50%, up 60% in the United States, I should mention too. And they did that while increasing the price. Their Fold 7 is now $1,999, where 2 years ago, the Fold was $1,799. So a $200 increase, and yet they're still doing well. So there seems to be a lot of momentum in that area. We expect Apple, of course, to jump in on foldables soon as well.
Oh, that was about to be my question to you. We've certainly heard those reports that a foldable phone may be coming. Corning may be working on supplying the glass. There's all these reports about the potential of this. Do you think that in conjunction with the iPhone sales, which you think is a tariff effect, in fact, that people tried to get out ahead of that, is that going to be enough to give Apple another boost until they really decide how and where they're going to enter this AI race?
It might. There'll definitely be a lot of publicity around it. There'll be a lot of hype, and I have faith in the company. It'll be a really good product. The problem is it's going to be very expensive. And iPhones typically are already expensive, though they've been doing a good job, I would say, in the last few years of bringing down the price by reselling their older models. But the issue here is, and they know this, which is why they've been slow coming to the foldable market, besides the technological challenges, is that this is totally going to cannibalize iPad sales. Because when you're able to put basically a foldable tablet into your pocket, you may not need an iPad as much as you did before. So I think that's one reason why they've been hesitant to do this. So the iPad sales already decline is already like a good sign for them in the sense that they can jump in on that. So this might offset those numbers. I'm not sure if it's going to completely save them. They did have the issues with Vision Pro, of course, as well. But, their service is very strong with Apple TV. They just did that movie F1 this summer, which was a huge hit for them. And Mac sales seem to be pretty steady. Again, they were up this quarter, which may be a tariff effect, but they've been well received, especially the M4 chip. So I expect that to continue.
And you mentioned the tariff impact potentially being why we did see that surprise uptick in the iPhones. We didn't get a lot of commentary, mostly because the tariff frameworks aren't done. I think they were protected that they didn't have to give it. But how much impact in this coming quarter do you think we could potentially see as they, work to pivot their supply chain with their exposure in China and Vietnam and some of these places that have 20% plus tariffs where they bring parts in from?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a big challenge. They are obviously launching a new product in the fall. It'll be the new iPhone 17. And, how they can control those costs is going to be difficult. Like I said, we're expecting, the rumor is, a $50 increase, but Samsung's been increasing by $100 on some of their devices, as I just mentioned. So, I wouldn't rule that out either. So those costs will definitely be passed on. It won't be as dramatic as a $2,000 iPhone unless you get the super high end one. But I do expect the prices to go up. But where the market is right now, there's so much in flux here. How China reacts to things obviously is going to be a big part of this, as well as the Trump administration.
Certainly. Now, I do want to pivot to Microsoft, too. You had mentioned them earlier. They've hit that $4 trillion market cap, now only the second company to do that behind NVIDIA. What were your thoughts there? Because sort of a very opposite story here. They're very clear in their AI spending and where they plan to be in the AI race.
Yeah, it's funny. I got my start covering Microsoft consumer tech, which we still do cover, things like Xbox and laptops. But they've really pulled back in the consumer segment for the last couple of years because Apple and, of course, Google is there and Samsung. But they've been, putting a lot of money into what they used to call, when they still call it intelligent cloud. That was the big subdivision, and then Azure was a part of that. Now they, for the first time, broke out Azure numbers, which is really interesting. Now the other companies already do this, but it goes to show you how much confidence Microsoft has in their cloud and AI infrastructure. They expect positive growth to continue. They outpaced growth this quarter compared to Amazon, which is why, Amazon's stock went down a little bit. So Amazon's still the number one when it comes to cloud compute, but Microsoft is right there and gaining more customers faster. They're obviously building out as much computing power as they can for this AI infrastructure, because the faster you do that, the more power you have, the lower you can bring down the cost. They are expecting enterprise to adopt Copilot more in the coming year, which will, of course, drive up the demand for AI. The question is, how much can they bring down costs, and whether or not we're going to have any major advancements in AI that could really change things. China came out there and was supposedly able to train their models without using as much sophisticated hardware as the US is. If something like that happens here, it can change the dynamic of, this CapEx that's kind of through the roof for all these companies in terms of spending for AI.
And so you mentioned, you started your career covering some of their consumer products. That demand is softening for them. What do you think the pivot looks like for them to make that a bigger growth sector?
It's really tough. I keep telling people right now is the best time to buy a Windows PC, just because the processors, especially from Qualcomm, but Intel and AMD as well, are exceptional. We're getting really good battery life now, 10 hours plus on these things. Windows 11 is very mature. And then, of course, you have this whole thing called a Copilot Plus PC or an AI PC, where they have an NPU on the device itself, which can handle AI tasks. Now, one can make a very strong and I would say accurate argument that the ability to use AI on laptops is very early stages, and consumers don't quite see the value in it right now. Come a year or two, that could definitely change. Sam Altman with OpenAI was saying how personal computers, are going to be very important to the future of AI because they can do localized processing, which is both important for enterprise, for security, but as well as speed. So it's going to be an interesting to see how laptops continue to evolve over the next year or two. But yeah, right now it is softer than I expect it to be.
Daniel, we appreciate you being with us today to talk through Microsoft, talk through Apple, and also that foldable phone that seems to keep popping up as a possibility. That's Daniel Rubino, the editor-in-chief at Windows Central.